Hey everybody, it's Rob here from Rob's Game Group, and I am back with another episode of A Look at the Book. This is episode 20 of A Look at the Book. And this episode, we are going to be taking a look at Hammer+Cross. And this is a micro chapbook RPG rulebook for Gothic vampire horror. I'm going to delve into this in just a minute. But first, I actually had a message from somebody that asked me something that I feel like I need to address. I've addressed this in another video, much older video, so it probably wasn't watched, but I'm going to address it again here. I do a lot of reviews, I do a lot of promotion and talking about, books that I think you should get, or games I think you should get. Let me be clear right now. I do not receive any compensation from these companies for this. It doesn't matter whether it's, big companies that do Savage Worlds or Alien, or smaller companies that do Basic Fantasy. I don't get compensated from them. I don't get free books from them. I buy everything just like you do. If I was to get sent something from a company that they wanted me to review on the channel, then that disclaimer would be the first thing you would see, is that this was a copy that was sent to me for review. Because I want to keep everything as upfront and honest as possible, I would not hide that from you. I would just tell you flat out. But to the date of this video, I have never been sent anything from a company to review, and I'm not sitting and asking companies to do it. I'm just stating that if that were to be the case, I would let you know before we got very far into the video at all. So understand that the things I'm telling you should go buy are things that I go and buy. So, without further ado, in one of my earlier videos, I talked about the micro chapbook RPG, sorry for the glare, and what they are. So if you haven't seen that, it's the micro chapbook RPG overview video. You should go back and look at that. They're kind of solo RPG / choose your own adventure type books, and a lot of them are these scenario collection books. And they're just random scenarios. You can just play them. I also suggested that you could use them as a basis for your own adventures for regular RPGs with your game group. And I stand by that. I still think that is a fact. But they also have a few of the deluxe core rule books for their settings. And Hammer+Cross is another setting. And it is Gothic vampire, Gothic horror that is themed around the Hammer horror movies. And if you've never seen any of the Hammer horror movies, you should definitely go check them out, because they are very, very cool. I love Gothic horror. It's one reason I've always loved Ravenloft. It is Gothic horror. And that's kind of what this is. But it's the mini chapbook form. And it is done in such a way, well, it's a deluxe rulebook for one thing. A lot of these smaller ones come with just the basic rules in them, and this one comes with the complete deluxe rules in it. So they take a lot more time with each rule and give a lot more explanation. And I'm going to go over some of that as we're taking a look at this one. So first off, this one I got off of Amazon a while back. I think it's like it was like $6 or $7, something like that. And honestly, I'll go ahead and tell you up front, worth every penny. If you like Gothic horror. If you don't like Gothic horror with vampires, then you probably shouldn't have clicked on this video. But you definitely shouldn't buy this book. If you do like that, then this is absolutely something you should check out. So this is Hammer+Cross. So look at the book, episode 20. And like I said, it's $6 or $7. It clocks in at 118 pages. And it is Gothic horror. It's very Ravenloft esque style. Only this is not set in a fantasy world somewhere. I mean, it kind of is, but it's not set in a fantasy world with tons of, like, you know, dwarves and elves and things like that. It's more of the Victorian era Earth Gothic horror. So you don't have fantasy races. You can intermix fantasy races with this, and it has a section in the book that talks about that if you want to do that. But as written, it's designed that everybody's playing humans because you're playing, you know, on Earth in mid to late 1800s. They talk they got a lot of good art in here. Like, that's very cool. I like that. Let's flip, and like I did with the other one, show you a little bit of the art. Show you some of the more cooler stuff in here. Obviously everything's, you know, old black and white, but it's done really well. I like it. Let's get back to where some of the vampires and stuff are. I mean, it's definitely not all done by the same artist, you can tell. But very, very nice art. So here, there's one more, and then we're going to go into the book itself. Okay, so they tell you in the beginning, they have a section that opens the book up with what is Hammer+Cross. It's a simple dungeon crawling role-playing game of gothic vampire horror that can be played solo or with a traditional GM, if you so wish. And then they talk about, you know, the game is a tribute to gothic horror films and literature, most specifically the Hammer horror films. The game is strongly impacted and attuned to the gothic and foreboding themes, atmosphere, and mood of those films. And then for inspiration and insight into the vibe we're going for here, I highly recommend watching some of the following films. And it lists a total of 28 of Hammer's horror films. And I'm going to go through the list here, because if you haven't seen any of these, go track them down and watch them, because I've seen almost all of these, and they're really good. Revenge of Frankenstein, The Evil of Frankenstein, Frankenstein Created Woman, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, The Horror of Frankenstein, Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, The Brides of Dracula, Dracula Prince of Darkness, Dracula Is Risen from the Grave, Taste the Blood of Dracula, Scars of Dracula, The Kiss of the Vampire, Vampire Circus, Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter, The Vampire Lovers, Lust for a Vampire, Twins of Evil, Hound of the Baskervilles, The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll, The Curse of the Werewolf, The Phantom of the Opera, The Gorgon, The Witches, The Plague of the Zombies, The Reptile, The Devil Rides Out, Countess Dracula, and Hands of the Ripper. One of those that that they listed in there that I just read out to you is actually one of my all-time favorite horror movies. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Hammer horror, and Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter. This is a very good movie. I really, really love this movie, and you'll see more of that from me in a minute. But Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter, it was, from what I understand, was originally intended to be a 3-film deal. I don't know if it was budget or how it performed or whatever, but they only made the one. The second movie was done, I think, last year in comic book form. You can buy the trade paperback off of Amazon or maybe from your local or comic shop. But they didn't make the other two movies. But however, this movie is very good. It doesn't leave you hanging. It's a very enjoyable watch, and you watch it, it very much has that gothic horror vampire feel to it. So the sections that they go into in the book here, in the smaller books, they have the rules are broken down. You know, you get a couple of sentences a piece just to give you enough to play the game. But in here, each gets a full page with a thorough description of the rules, much more in-depth look at each rule than what you get in the basic version. So after the inspiration section, we go to section 2. What do I need to play? And it talks about what all you know, and I did that in my other video too. You don't need a lot. Then it goes over gameplay basics, which is very simple. Character creation outline. Section 5 has us looking at the character stats, which is all the same as the other micro RPGs. Section 6 is the character classes. Now, classes have changed in here. They basically do the same thing they do in the other games where you have more fantasy style. This is more the Victorian Gothic horror style character classes. You have a soldier, a hunter, a doctor/nurse, or a priest/nun to choose from. But what I also really like is then they have a full page on creating your own classes. So if there's a class from one of these type of movies that they didn't cover there that you want to do yourself, you can. So what did they do with this? Because there are no races, they're just the human race. There's no elves and dwarves and halflings. Well, in this, instead of races, you have the character's order, the order that they belong to. So they can either belong to the Order of the Hammer, the Order of the Dagger, the Order of the Cross, or the Order of the Sun. And you also have, again, a nice little page on how to create your own orders if you have ideas for ones you want to use in your game. These games, much like normal OSRs, are very, very plug and play. If you want to make up your own house rules and add them in, it is very easily done. So section 8. We get to, basically each page is a section, but section 8 we get to talks about your health and willpower, which is your normal 2 main stats that are used in combat in micro RPGs, but they add a new one in here called faith. And it is how you resist the power of the vampires. Then we come to our weapons section, where we have a much more detailed list of weapons that are period and theme specific. And I'll run through them real quick. Melee weapons, you have daggers, wooden stakes, hammers, wooden polearms, steel polearms, poleaxes, billy clubs, sharpened crosses, silver daggers, cane sword, silver sword, sickle, rapier, and scythe. And then ranged weapons, you have holy cross, holy water sprayer, so I guess a water gun, it's the flaming cross, blessed long whip, wonder what they're going for there, stake crossbow, sacred cross, acid vial, rusty revolver, silver revolver, mini stake revolver, rifle, bladed boomerang, black powder pistol, and black powder rifle. Excuse me. So a lot to choose from there. Also, it's listed. It says everything in pounds in here, but pound is 1 pound is equal to 1 gold piece. So it's an easy transition back and forth between this and the other micro RPGs. Your armor options in here are shield, top hat, black cloak, chainmail, or blessed robes. And then your items are very similar to the other ones. Bread crust, wine, steak meal, holy water, and miracles that you can buy. And each of those does different things. Then we hit section 11, which talks about generating rooms, because remember, this is a game where you're generating everything as you go. So generating rooms, and it has a description, a much more detailed 2-page description on how to do that. Doorways and how they work, how to check and see if they're unlocked, stuck, locked, or trapped. Section 13 is the different room types that you can have. And then we go into monsters, and it has all the basic rules for how monsters work. But then we have specifically some special rules for vampires. Now, the rules for vampires in this do not translate, unless you want them to, over to other, like I have a fantasy one in this book, an adventure in this book, where you have to face a vampire. He doesn't have these powers, unless I wanted to give it to him. Effectively, these powers are supposed to just be used when you're playing Hammer+Cross. But the powers are Bloodletting and Power, which are two ratings that the vampires have. Bloodletting is each time a player rolls a 6 during a melee attack, meaning they really fail. It's an instant failure. The vampire bites them and drinks their blood. The Bloodletting rating is how much life force that the vampire regains after drinking their blood. And Power, this is the mental strength of the vampire. It is the amount of faith that the player will lose if they fail during a faith check. Alright, moving on. Then we have the combat procedure broke down for us. The bravery procedure. Ranged combat. Melee combat. The vampire's bite itself and what special rules it has. The rules on running away. And I feel like I'm skipping a page there. I'm not. Section 20 talks about the faith check. So the faith check, after a room is cleared of monsters, and only if the player was bitten by a vampire during combat, that player must now make a faith check using their wits. If the player fails, they lose faith in the amount of the vampire's power. Remember that power rating they had. The player may spend 1 willpower to re-roll this check as many times as they have will to spend. If their faith ever reaches 0, they succumb to the powers of darkness and die, transforming into a vampire themselves. So that is how you want high faith, because otherwise you can become a vampire. So then we go on to search rolls. The special rules for fighting a boss, which again, some fantastic artwork there. Backtracking through a dungeon, leveling up, and then we come to section 25, which is the Vengeance of Volcora Village. Vengeance on Volcora Village is a mini campaign for Hammer+Cross. It takes one player on a journey to the small rural Transylvania village of Volcora. There they will meet the frightened townsfolk who believe a vampire is behind the current string of illness and death. The player will meet the skeptical Dr. Lorca, who can join the player in the campaign as a companion. They will explore the village and the surrounding countryside, investigating for vampires. And then it gives you a little more breakdown on how that works, and it comes with a numbered map of the village. And what's cool about this, as opposed to the other ones, is this is a campaign. Now, you can play the adventures as one-offs if you want to, but if you want to play the campaign, it actually starts out with you showing up here at the inn, and you can choose areas to go to, and you can go back to other areas, whatever you want to do, but you can't go, it works in reverse. You can't go to the castle till you've been to the cave. You can't go into the cave until you've been to the woods. You can't go into the dark woods until you've been to the fort. So that's the ending of it that's the ending of it right there. You have to follow that trek. Everywhere else you can just go whenever. And you can back out of those dungeons if you need to and go rest. The village map has the Ravenscaw Inn, Mayor Wendell's house, the church, the town mill, the food storage barns, the blacksmith, the home of Vincent's Draper family, the marsh, the town outpost, the Black Woods, the caves, and Volcora Castle. Alright, so I'm going to read you a little bit of it here, and just to kind of show you what I'm talking about as far as what you can do with this. The story thus far at section 25.2, getting started. You recently received a letter from a priest of Volcora imploring you come to the village. He believes there are forces of evil at work, which the mayor refuses to do anything about. Gameplay basics. You will begin by visiting location 1, the Ravenscaw Tavern. After that, you can visit almost any location on the map you wish. Simply turn to the corresponding section for the area listed and read the description. The exception is that you may not visit the castle until you have been to the cave. You may not visit the cave until you have been through the woods, and you may not go through the woods until you've been to the outpost. So those kind of work in order. You have to do those that way. You are never obligated to finish a dungeon in one go. If things get too hard or desperate for you, you can backtrack to the exit and come back and try again at another time. You can choose to keep the layout of the dungeon from the previous run or and just repopulate the rooms, or you can start a new one. You don't get the campaign reward listed at the end of the dungeon until you have fully beaten the dungeon boss. You may always return to a dungeon in town and run through it again for more money or rewards, but you can't get the campaign reward more than once. Let's see. So we start, the adventure actually starts in section 25.3. Now keep in mind, you've gone through this point, you've created your character, and I'm going to read you the beginning of the adventure here and show you how it's set up. And this one is much more choose your own adventure than those one-shots because it is a campaign. So, section 25.3. Arriving in the town one foggy and late afternoon, you ride up the west path in your carriage past the wet marsh and straight to the largest building at the center of town. You promptly climb out and pay the driver, who seems nervous. Upon receiving payment, he throws down your luggage without any regard to your belongings, and with that, he zooms off back into the fog. Picking up your bags, you head into the cramped inn. People sit at tables around the room with draughts of ale and wine. An old woman slurps soup in the corner. There is a somber tone in the air, and no one seems to be talking. Your presence goes mostly unnoticed, except by the woman behind the bar. She is an attractive woman around 25 with ruby red lips and raven hair. "Evening, stranger. How can I help you?" she asked. "We have food and drink available and rooms for the night." You take a seat at the bar. And that is when, like old Choose Your Own Adventures or Endless Quest, we start getting hit with choices. If you ask about the local priest, read section A. If you ask about the mayor, read section B. If you ask about the plague, read section C. If you choose to use the inn's services, you can. Here's how they work. You can rest for £1 to completely heal your health and willpower. Purchase a bread crust, wine, or steak meal. You can use these services at any point in between dungeons when you revisit the inn. And then if you go on to talk to her about the priest, more information opens up about the walled section of the city. You can then choose that as an area you want to talk about. And you basically start gaining the story and going to places in town. And then some of the places will have pre-generated characters in here for you to meet because you're going to be dealing with them in one form or another, perhaps as an NPC that travels with you throughout this entire adventure. And this adventure is very much, there's zombies and wolves and things like that, but it primarily focuses on vampires until you get down to the final adventure, the castle, where the monsters in there are literally Wolfguard, fledgling vampire, alkalite vampires, vampire brides, vampire lords, and a master vampire that you have to fight. And then you get campaign rewards for beating him, which I'm not going to tell you what they are. You can just buy the book. And then it comes to section 26, which is playing with a game master. And it gives you rules, and some rules, but mostly just ideas and guidance on how to run this as an adventure, which most of it's pretty self-explanatory. You could run this as an adventure for a whole group of players, and it would be pretty fun. Then section 27 is combining with other micro chapbooks. So then it literally is what it sounds like. It talks about how you would deal with faith, pounds, and orders in other chapbooks, because those things really only apply to this. And then we are rounded out with a character sheet, which I did not photocopy at all. I literally do my own index cards. It's really well done. It's really cool. I could see running this using this system, but I could also see taking like basic fantasy, and because I love running basic fantasy, take it and run it with this too. I have made a character that I'm going to run. I only just got started with it a little bit. I'm probably going to play it some tonight. But I made my own version of Captain Kronos because he's my favorite hero from the horror movies, from the Hammer horror movies. So I made a version of him that I'm going to run through this. And yeah, I really like it. And I think that if you really like gothic horror, vampires, you're going to really like this too. And it is a complete game for $6 or $7. I mean, you have to have dice and graph paper, but most of us are gamers who already have that. So, but it is a complete game with the rules, a full campaign and everything, and you really can't beat it for that price. I highly recommend picking it up. It's really good. That's all I've got for right now. If you enjoy these kind of videos that I'm doing, please consider subscribing. Hit the notification bell so you know when I put videos up, which is at least on Fridays, but also all throughout the week as I get new content. If you'd like to interact with me or my game group more, you can find us on Facebook at Rob's Game Group, all one word. And that's pretty much all I've got for right now. Until next time, good gaming and good luck.